My name is Dr. Matilda Morrison. I'm 38 years old. I've delivered bad news to hundreds of families, held trembling hands through terminal diagnoses, and watched people fall apart in my office. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I walked into my own home and watched my husband make love to my sister on the cream-colored sectional we picked out for our second anniversary. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because it was clinic day, the kind where grief clung to your skin like humidity 3 hours holding Mrs. Lopez's hand as she wept over her lung biopsy, then the Hendricksons with their teenage boys, and a diagnosis that would change everything they thought their future might hold. I was emotionally wrung out. I needed quiet. I needed Franklin. I needed a dumb joke from Winter, her signature gallows humor that somehow always made the worst days tolerable. I did not expect to see her on top of my husband. The door had creaked open like it always did. My shoes clicked softly against the hardwood as I walked in, letting the familiar scent of roses from our backyard pull me toward calm. But then I stopped cold. The bag slipped from my fingers before my brain caught up. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the kind that usually echoed forever in an empty house. But not today, not over their gasps and moans. Franklin's hands were on her hips. Those hands, the same ones that wiped my tears at my mother's funeral just 6 months ago. The same hands that had cradled my face that morning, whispering sweet promises about our anniversary trip to Paris. And now, they were gripping Winter like she was the only woman he'd ever loved. Winter's auburn hair spilled down her back like wildfire, glowing in the afternoon light. She moved like she knew this rhythm, like she'd practiced, like it wasn't the first time. And above them, our wedding photo, grinning at me from the mantel. My body froze. My heartbeat didn't just stop, it screamed inside my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just watched. That's when she turned her head, and we locked eyes. Everything around me slowed. Her face drained of color, then flushed so fast I almost pitied her. Franklin followed her gaze, and his features contorted into something between shock and horror, like he'd seen a ghost, like I was the ghost, in my own house, in my own life. Matilda. Winter breathed. It cracked in her throat, barely more than air. I said nothing. I couldn't speak. The words had been blown out of my chest, replaced by splinters and ash. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with sheer disbelief. I turned, walked back through the same door I'd entered. Behind me, I heard scrambling, Winter calling after me, Franklin cursing as he tumbled off the couch. But I didn't stop. I walked past the rose bushes he planted last spring with a smug grin, past the mailbox that read Mr. and Mrs. Franklin Harrison in stupid, cheerful yellow paint. I walked until my legs found the car. And then I drove. The road blurred beneath me. My phone buzzed again and again in my purse, like a wasp trapped in a jar. I didn't need to look. I knew exactly who was calling. Probably both of them. Probably writing some pathetic script to twist the truth into a palatable mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. You don't accidentally destroy someone's life over and over for months. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Where was I going? I didn't know. I passed the elementary school where we once joked about future kids. The coffee shop where Franklin and I had our first date. The one where he spilled cappuccino on his lap and made me laugh until I snorted. I passed it all like a ghost retracing her life before death. Eventually, I pulled into the empty lot by the lighthouse. Our place. The one where Franklin proposed, where he'd slipped a ring onto my trembling hand and said, "I want forever with you." Forever had an expiration date. I sat there, engine off, silence filling the space he used to occupy. My lungs squeezed until I couldn't hold it anymore, and I screamed. a raw, guttural sound that tore out of me like something dying. My fists slammed the steering wheel. My whole body shook with the weight of every shattered illusion. He'd taken everything. Not just the marriage, but the narrative, the future, my trust, my sister. But beneath the rage, something colder stirred. A thought, a seed. They thought they knew me. Matilda the calm one, the healer, the peacemaker, the woman who forgave too easily, bent too far, swallowed too much. But what they didn't know was that I'd learned a few things during my training, things that didn't show up on medical charts. I knew about nerves and pressure points, about how to read fear in someone's eyes, about how the human psyche fractures, and how it can be manipulated. I knew that the deepest wounds are the ones that leave no blood. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls, 8 voicemails, a text from Winter, please. I know this looks bad. Can we talk? She still wanted to explain. Let her. Let them both try. Let them twist themselves into knots, trying to reframe the unforgivable. Let them sweat. Let them wonder how far I'd go. Let them fear what I might do with the truth. Because I'd already made my first decision, I wasn't going to confront them in tears. I was going to bury them in facts. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in oranges and reds like winter's hair. I looked out at the crashing waves and reached into the glove box. Inside was a small recorder I used to dictate notes after long shifts. I pressed record. Tuesday, 7:14 p.m. Subject Matilda Morrison. Diagnosis betrayal. Stage terminal. Treatment plan, total exposure. And that's when I knew. I wasn't the one who'd been destroyed. I was the one rebuilding. And they were going to watch. I checked into the Grandview Hotel under my maiden name, Matilda Clark. Room 412, corner suite. 2 windows and a view of the city I used to love. It smelled like old carpets and lemon-scented cleaner safe. Impersonal. Exactly what I needed. The front desk clerk smiled politely. Enjoy your stay. Stay? No, this wasn't a stay, it was a war room. I dropped my overnight bag on the armchair and locked the door behind me with a click that felt final. The kind of sound you hear when you know there's no going back. I hadn't spoken to Franklin or Winter since the incident. My phone was still vibrating every few hours, the screen lighting up with their names, like ghosts refusing to rest. But I refused to answer. Every unanswered call was a reminder I controlled the narrative now. I opened my laptop and began compiling files. I pulled PDFs from our joint bank account, copies of our mortgage, legal records, emails from Franklin's investment firm. I opened my medical journals, reliable, clinical, something solid in the chaos. It's funny, Sissy. I've always been the organized one, at work. I'm the doctor who color codes everything, who double-checks dosages twice. Franklin used to tease me for it. Now that obsessive precision would be the thing that saved me. By midnight, my desk was covered in papers and digital tabs. Divorce law, asset division, community VERS, separate property, post-nuptial agreements in Massachusetts. I even started a folder labeled Contingency of Franklin Denial Spiral. A knock startled me. I froze. 2 seconds passed. 3. Then a familiar voice, low and desperate. Matilda. I know you're in there. Please, just talk to me. Franklin. He must have gone hotel to hotel, showing my picture around. And clearly someone at the front desk had recognized me. His voice cracked through the wood. I've been to every hotel in the city. The receptionist downstairs said you checked in today. Baby, please. You can't just disappear like this. The word baby made bile rise in my throat. I sat perfectly still on the bed, my fingers hovering over my keyboard, cursor blinking beside a half-finished sentence, Section 3 Property Protection Protocols. Franklin sighed. Winter told me she came clean to Nathan. He kicked her out. She's staying at your mom's now, crying nonstop. Says she's losing her mind because you won't talk to her. Good. Let her feel it. Let her experience what it's like to have your entire life yanked out from under you. I know you're angry. I get it. What you saw? God, I can't even imagine how that felt. But it wasn't what it looked like. I swear. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. We drank too much wine. She was upset about Nathan. It just happened. I almost laughed out loud. That line, that's the oldest excuse in the cheater's handbook. Still, I didn't speak. I just leaned forward and typed, "He's still lying. He's minimizing. Objective extract confession under pressure later." Franklin knocked again, softer this time. I love you, Matilda. Only you. Always have. Since the day we met at that awful medical convention with the upside-down anatomy slides, remember? You made a joke about the pancreas having stage fright. I did remember. I also remembered Winter being there that weekend, supposedly supporting my career. Did they meet then? Had this been going on that long? My phone buzzed with another notification. Not Franklin. Nathan Morrison. I stared at the screen. From Nathan, I was hoping you'd reach out. There are things you need to know. About Franklin and Winter. Things that go back further than you think. My blood went cold. Further than I think. To Nathan Brewster's Cafe. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. From Nathan, I'll be there. And Matilda. I'm so sorry. I closed my laptop and lay on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. My pulse thumped steadily in my ears. My mind refused to quiet. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Winter's face. The way her expression shifted when our eyes met. Like she'd never expected to be seen for what she truly was. The next morning, I looked like hell, and I liked it that way. Let the world see a woman undone. No makeup, hair pulled into a loose knot, my white coat slung over my arm like a ghost of who I used to be. I arrived at Brewster's Cafe 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the far back, facing the door. Old habit from my residency, always keep an exit in view. Nathan walked in at exactly 2:59. He looked broken, not in a dramatic way. In the quiet, hollow way people look when grief has taken up residence inside them. His once neat brown hair was a mess. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with sleepless nights. But when he saw me, he offered a smile. "Matilda," he said, sliding into the chair across from me, "you look well. You look like hell," I cut in dryly. He chuckled weakly. Fair enough. The barista came over. Nathan ordered a double espresso. He cradled the mug like it was anchoring him. I didn't waste time. How long? He blinked. The physical affair, about 8 months. Based on what I found. But emotionally, he leaned in, voice low. It goes back years. I froze. Nathan glanced down, avoiding my stare. Remember Winter's engagement party 4 years ago? I nodded. Franklin and I had been dating for a year then. He'd been so helpful planning everything, organizing flowers and food. Everyone said how lucky Winter was to have a future brother-in-law who cared that much. Turns out, it wasn't about her day. Nathan continued. I found messages on her old phone. Backups she forgot to erase. Late-night texts. Inside jokes I was never part of. Compliments that crossed boundaries. I felt my stomach twist. She dressed different when she knew she'd see him. She laughed harder at his jokes. I saw it. I felt it. But I told myself I was crazy. That I was jealous. That I needed therapy. I stared at him, a sick realization forming. She told you that, didn't she? That you were paranoid. He nodded. She told me I was controlling. That my suspicion was ruining our marriage. I started taking anxiety meds to fix myself while she was sneaking around with your husband. I gritted my teeth. Nathan leaned back, defeated. They made us feel like the problem, like we were obstacles to their happiness. No, I said quietly. We were furniture, something to step over. He nodded, then paused. There's more. Last month, while you were at that medical conference in Chicago, she told me she was out with college friends, but I drove past your house around midnight. Her car was parked outside. So was Franklin's. That weekend, Winter had been texting me nonstop, asking about my keynote. So proud of you, sis. She wrote, you're killing it. Meanwhile, she was sleeping with my husband. I swallowed down bile. Nathan watched me carefully. I confronted her. She said they'd just talked, that Franklin needed advice, that you were always busy, that she was just being a good sister. I laughed bitterly. She convinced herself she was helping. Nathan leaned in, his voice serious. Matilda, I want to help you. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. Just tell me what you need. I looked him in the eyes and said 3 words. Total, strategic, exposure. I arrived at Marcello's 15 minutes early. The place hadn't changed. Still dim lighting, red checkered tablecloths, and the old Italian host, who never wrote down a single order, but somehow remembered everything. The same table by the window was open, the one where Franklin and I celebrated our first anniversary. He had fed me tiramisu and whispered that he couldn't wait to see our kids playing in our backyard someday. That table would now become the scene of his undoing. I wore the red dress he gave me for my birthday 2 years ago. The one he said made me look like I ruled the world. I wore it because I do rule it now. Around my neck, I wore the silver chain. What Franklin didn't know the pendant hanging there was the melted remains of my wedding ring. He walked in at 6:59 p.m. on the dot. He looked fragile. Franklin was always polished. Perfect hair, tailored suits, effortless confidence. But tonight, he was wearing a shirt that hadn't been ironed, and his gait was hesitant. He scanned the restaurant until his eyes landed on me, and relief softened his face. Matilda, he said like a prayer. He crossed the room quickly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I didn't smile. I simply gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, glancing at my face, my hands, my dress. I could see him trying to read me, like he used to read investment trends, only now the stakes were much higher. You look beautiful, he offered. I didn't respond, just tilted my head, waiting. I've missed you, he added. I've been a wreck, not sleeping, not eating, just thinking about everything. I folded my hands in my lap. How's Winter? Franklin flinched. Matilda, I don't want to talk about her. How is she? She's staying with your mother. She's devastated. Devastated, I echoed flatly. She asked me to tell you how sorry she is. And you, I asked, voice low. He swallowed hard. God, yes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened? It was a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. Mistake. They always called it that, like it was a misplaced decimal, or forgetting an anniversary. Not 8 months of deception. Not 4 years of emotional erosion. Tell me about the mistake, I said, my voice calm. When did it start? Franklin hesitated. His gaze drifted to the candle flickering between us. It didn't start anywhere specific. It was just that one night, Winter was upset about Nathan. She came over to talk. We had wine. Too much wine. Things got blurry. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. Strike one. Nathan had told me otherwise. This wasn't one night. It was dozens of choices, dozens of betrayals. What kind of problems was Winter having with Nathan, I asked, watching his face. She said he was distant, that he didn't understand her, that she felt invisible. Strike two. Winter had painted herself as the victim, the misunderstood wife, and Franklin had played right into it. Franklin, I leaned forward slightly. Look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? He hesitated, and for a brief second I saw him, the man I married, the man I thought I knew. His expression crumbled. He sighed. 6 weeks, he said finally. It started 6 weeks ago. You were working those double shifts. Winter was having a hard time. We started talking more. It felt easy, familiar. Strike three. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I swiped to the screenshot Nathan had sent me that morning. I turned the screen toward Franklin. Winter's message, can't stop thinking about last night. When can we be together again? Dated 3 months ago. Franklin's face drained of color. Where did you get that? Nathan found Winter's old phone. She forgot it auto-backed up. A lie, but effective. There are more, I added. Dozens more. Want me to read the one where she says you're better in bed than her husband? Or the one where you talk about gradually ending our marriages? Matilda, please. Franklin's hands trembled on the table. I can explain. No, I said sharply. You can't explain why you've been planning to dismantle 2 marriages behind our backs. You can't explain why you looked me in the eye and lied again and again. His eyes welled up. I love you, he said. Whatever those messages say, I love you. Winter. She was an escape. But you're my life. He reached across the table. I didn't move. Let him reach. Let him sweat. I meant what I said at our wedding. I want forever with you. Do you? I asked. He nodded. Then prove it. I pulled a folded document from my purse and slid it across the table. Franklin unfolded it. His brow furrowed as he read. This is a post-nuptial agreement. Yes, I said. If we're rebuilding, I need security. He skimmed the clauses. I saw his eyes widen as he read. I retain full ownership of the house, my medical practice, our savings. He keeps his business and car. Any violation of fidelity or contact with Winter voids all joint assets. This is extreme. You destroyed our financial partnership the moment you slept with my sister. This is me protecting myself from being blindsided again. Franklin stared at the paper. His lips parted, then closed. His ego wrestled with his desperation. And Winter, he asked quietly, what happens with her? You cut contact completely. No calls, no texts. If she shows up at our door, you call the police. His shoulders slumped. And if I agree to all this, then we start over, I said, softening my tone. Clean slate. His face lit up like a child being offered a second chance. He reached for the pen, and, without reading the fine print, he signed. I watched the ink dry like it was sealing his fate. I love you so much, he said, reaching for my hand again. I promise you won't regret this. I smiled, just enough. I'm counting on it. We walked out of Marcello's together. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple who just recommitted. He slipped his arm around my waist. I let him. But in my head, I was already writing the next scene. Because phase 1 was complete. I had my husband exactly where I needed him. Grandview Park, 10 a.m. The duck pond was as quiet as a chapel, save for the occasional flap of wings and the low murmurs of morning joggers. I sat on the weathered bench near the old sycamore tree, my coat pulled tight against the chill. In my bag, my phone, a digital recorder, and a printed copy of Franklin's signed post-nup agreement, just in case. I wasn't here to reconcile. I was here to end the charade. Winter arrived exactly 6 minutes late. Of course, she did control had always been her game. She wore oversized sunglasses and an oatmeal-colored trench coat. No makeup. Hair unbrushed. She looked like the version of herself she never let anyone else see. But I'd seen it once before after she broke up with her college fiancé. That same stunned, raw expression, like the world had finally said no to her. She approached slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, voice small. I didn't respond, just watched her. She sat beside me on the bench, leaving a space of air between us thick enough to hold years of betrayal. "I'm not going to pretend," she began. "You hate me. I get it. I hate myself." "Do you?" She flinched. "I don't know who I am anymore. Everything's a blur. Nathan kicked me out. He won't take my calls. Mom barely looks at me. I lost my job. I lost you." I raised an eyebrow. "You lost me." Winter's voice cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Franklin and we never meant to hurt you." That line again. We never meant, I pulled the digital recorder from my coat pocket and pressed record, holding it plainly in view. She blinked. "What are you doing?" "Just making sure I remember this conversation exactly as it happens." She hesitated, then looked away. "Fine," she whispered. "I deserve that." I let the silence sit between us. "You know what hurts the most?" I said finally. "It's not the sex. It's not even the lies. It's that you didn't think I mattered enough to stop." She wiped at her eyes. I was jealous. I turned toward her, jealous. "Your life, your career, your marriage. Everyone always saw you first, even when we were kids. I was the pretty one, but you were the one they respected. Mom bragged about you. Franklin adored you. Even Nathan asked about your opinion more than mine." I stared at her, stunned. "You destroyed my life because you felt invisible." She looked down. "It's not an excuse. I'm just explaining." "No," I said flatly. "You're confessing. Keep going." She hesitated again, then spoke, each word like it cost her breath. "It wasn't just 8 months. It started about a year and a half ago. Franklin came over to help fix my thermostat. One drink turned into 2. Then it became regular. He'd say you were working late. I'd say Nathan was being cold. It got easier to lie the more we did it." My fingers curled around the recorder. She glanced up, eyes glassy. "But we never talked about a future. He never said he'd leave you. I didn't want him to. I just wanted to be wanted." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I don't want this anymore," she said, handing it to me. Inside the pearl earrings I gave her on her wedding day. I stared at them for a long moment, then closed the pouch and placed it in my lap. "I have something for you, too," I said quietly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the bench between us. Winter looked at it like it might explode. "What is it?" "A copy of Franklin's post-nup, signed, enforced, witnessed." She looked confused. I continued, "You're mentioned by name. Any contact with you, and he forfeits everything. He doesn't know that yet, but you will, because the next time you show up, you'll be dragging him into bankruptcy." Her eyes widened. You're serious." "I'm always serious, but you already knew that. You just never respected it." She picked up the envelope with shaking hands. "You're not going to forgive me," she whispered. "No," I said, "but I'll survive you." Winter's lower lip trembled. She stood slowly, the envelope pressed to her chest like a shield. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something more, a final plea, a last apology. But I turned away. And just like that, she left. I sat there for a long time after she was gone, watching the ducks move through the pond like they didn't care about human betrayal. I slipped the digital recorder back into my bag. Phase 2 complete. That afternoon, I returned to the Grandview Hotel. Nathan was waiting in the lobby, pacing. He had 2 coffees in hand and eyes that hadn't known peace in days. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show," he said when he saw me. "I needed one more truth," I replied. "Now I'm ready." We took the elevator to my floor. Once inside the room, I set the recorder on the table. She admitted everything. I told him. The timeline, the lies, the motives. Nathan nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Then let's talk strategy." We sat side by side at the tiny hotel desk. I opened my laptop and pulled up a file labeled Final Phase, Public Exposure. Nathan scanned it. "You're not just divorcing him. You're dismantling him." He made a public fool out of me. This time, it's my turn to control the narrative. Nathan looked at me with something like admiration, or maybe shared pain. "I dug into his firm," he said. "Franklin's been skimming client accounts, minor amounts enough to go unnoticed, but consistent." My jaw tightened. "That's how he paid for those weekends with Winter." He nodded. "Private resorts, spa charges." He was billing them to dummy accounts under one of his subsidiaries. "Can you prove it?" Nathan smiled grimly. "I already did." He slid over a USB drive. "Accounting forensics. You can walk into a courtroom tomorrow and ruin him. Or we leak it first. Get ahead of the press. Control the narrative. I know a journalist. Discreet, smart, trustworthy." I took a deep breath. Once I did this, there'd be no going back. "You sure you want in on this?" I asked him. "I'm already in," he said. "We both are." Outside the window, the city kept moving cars, people, lives untouched by our war. But in that hotel room, a storm was forming, carefully measured, deadly precise. I glanced at the melted ring around my neck. Time to burn down the rest. We arrived in Napa Valley on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of golden hour that made even betrayal look beautiful. Franklin had booked a private villa tucked into the hillside, vines curling up the stone walls, a terrace with a view of the valley that could make your chest ache. He thought it was romantic. He thought we were healing. He didn't know I brought more than a suitcase. I brought the USB drive. I brought the notarized post-nup in a leather folder. And I brought the ring chain around my neck, melted gold touching skin that no longer flinched. "This place is perfect," Franklin said, as he carried our bags in. "Just you and me, like it used to be." I smiled the way women have smiled for centuries to survive. We spent the afternoon walking through the vineyard. I let him hold my hand. He pointed out oak barrels and talked about retiring early. I asked questions like I cared. We laughed for the benefit of no one but the ghosts. That evening, he lit candles, cooked pasta, opened wine. "You remember our honeymoon in Florence?" he asked. I nodded. "We almost got lost in the Uffizi Gallery." "You were more interested in Botticelli than me," he teased. Botticelli never lied to me. The air stiffened. He cleared his throat, changed the subject. "Let's not talk about all that. This trip is about moving forward." He poured more wine. I watched the red liquid swirl like blood in the glass. "You sure we're ready for that?" I asked softly. He stepped around the table and took my hand. I know I ruined everything, but this week is about proving I can be better." "You don't have to prove anything," I whispered. But I was lying. He had to prove everything in court, in public, in every way that counted. That night, he fell asleep early, his arm around my waist, breathing steady like nothing had ever happened. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above us, and whispered into the dark, "One more day." Monday morning, 8:12 a.m. I slipped out of the villa and drove into town. Nathan was waiting at the cafe with a manila envelope and tired eyes. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. I took the envelope. Inside, a printed copy of the financial forensic report, every shady transaction, every shell account, dates, dollar amounts. enough to ruin Franklin's firm in a day. I've been ready since she sent him a selfie in my bathroom mirror, I said. Nathan smirked grimly. The journalist's name is Karen Liu. She's quiet, but thorough. She'll reach out today. I nodded, then handed him something in return. What's this? A burner phone. Once it's out, I want Franklin to find out the way I did blind. Furious. Powerless. Nathan looked at me for a long moment. You scare me sometimes, he said. Good, I replied. You should, That evening, Franklin and I had dinner under the stars. I wore the same dress I wore the night he proposed. He poured champagne, toasted to fresh starts, and then he pulled out a little blue box. Matilda, he said, standing up. I know I can never undo what I've done, but I want to spend every day trying. This is just a token. Inside a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with always yours. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. I smiled and let him fasten it around my wrist. It would be the last lie I ever accepted. Tuesday morning, 6:43 a.m. My phone buzzed with a message from Karen Liu. Story drops in 45 minutes. Prepare for fallout. We'll keep your name out until instructed otherwise. I watched Franklin sleep for a moment longer, then rose and made coffee. At 7:28, his phone started buzzing. First once, then 5 times, then non-stop. He stumbled into the kitchen, shirt half-buttoned, face pale. What the hell is going on? He scrolled. His hands shook. Matilda, my inbox is full. Board members? Clients? What is this article? I sipped my coffee, calm, controlled. He looked up, eyes wide. They're saying I embezzled funds, that I used client money for personal travel, that I used it to, he stopped, to pay for winter. He dropped into a chair. You have to believe me. I didn't mean. I know, I interrupted. You never mean anything. He stared at me, and in that moment, I saw the panic swallow him. You did this, he whispered. I walked to the counter and picked up the leather folder, opened it, slid out the post-nup. Page 4, I said, laying it in front of him. Clause 17. In the event of proven financial misconduct, the entirety of joint property is transferred to the non-offending spouse. His hands clenched into fists. This is entrapment. No, I said. This is strategy. He stood, knocking over the chair. You just destroyed my career. You destroyed your own. I just handed the public a mirror. He started to pace, mumbling, cursing, reaching for his phone again. Then he froze. He looked up, something dawning. The burner, he hissed. That phone call I got last week from an unknown number. That was you. You baited me. He laughed a sound that wasn't funny. You've been playing me since Marcello's. I nodded. Since before that. Franklin's jaw tightened. Why now? Why not just leave? I stepped closer, because women like me aren't allowed to just leave. We're told to forgive, to fix, to swallow. I wanted you to taste what it's like to be humiliated with a smile on your face. He stepped back. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's not? Because the article wasn't even the worst of it. He didn't know the footage existed. He didn't know about the hotel audio. He didn't know I still had one final card. One I'd only play in public. My fingers hovered over the screen, heart thudding so hard it blurred the words. He told me she was dying. Winter's voice silent, but screaming through that caption punched harder than anything she ever said to my face. I tapped the post. The image was of a handwritten note, a photograph of a hotel nightstand with a glass of wine beside it, and beneath it, a tear-stained letter that began, You said she was sick, that it was only a matter of time. The comments were flooding in. Wait, is this about Matilda Morrison? Is she okay? This man is beyond disgusting. And just like that, the narrative shifted from scandal to sickness, from betrayal to possible murder attempt. I FaceTimed. Nathan immediately. He answered on the second ring, shirtless, blinking against the glow of his phone. You saw it. She said I was dying. I said slowly that he told her I was terminal. Nathan exhaled sharply. That's not just infidelity. That's coercion. He manipulated her into an affair by framing you as a dying woman. My mind raced. I remembered the night Franklin forgot to pick me up from the ER, when I had food poisoning. He said he was helping a client in crisis. That must have been the night he planted the lie. Do you still have the hotel audio? I asked. Of course. Send it. We're not done. I waited until Franklin returned from his morning run. He was sweaty, glowing, on some kind of post-cardio high. His phone was still buzzing with alerts, but he didn't know what had just dropped. He walked in, kissed my cheek. You sleep okay? I handed him a printed copy of Winter's Instagram post. He scanned it, his face blanched. Then he looked up at me. She posted this. I nodded once. Matilda, she's spiraling. I didn't tell her you were dying. I just said. He paused, eyes darting, scrambling for a lie. I said you weren't doing well. Emotionally. I thought she'd back off. You told her I had months to live, I said, voice low. He ran a hand through his damp hair. It wasn't supposed to go public. She's unstable. This is revenge. No, I corrected. This is a mirror. You're finally seeing the man you are. I turned on the TV. The morning news had already picked up the post. Renowned attorney Franklin Morrison under fire. Again this time accused of manipulating a mistress with claims that his wife was terminally ill. He turned to me, eyes wild. You leaked this. I didn't have to. She did. Your empire is collapsing, and I haven't even touched the court filings yet. His hands shook as he grabbed the remote, muting the TV. We need to talk. Alone. Without the noise. I walked to my suitcase and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, I took out the melted ring-turned necklace and dropped it into his hand. You asked for a second chance. I said, this is what I forged from the lie you built. That gold was the last part of me that believed in you. He stared at it, silent. Then I placed a USB on the table. The audio, I said. He looked at me in horror. You recorded me. No. Winter did. She left her phone recording one night in the hotel. You told her I wouldn't survive the year. He sank into a chair. Jesus. No, not even he would touch this mess. He cradled his face in his hands. You really planned this. You turned every crack into a fault line. Correction, I replied. You made the cracks. I just followed the tremors. That afternoon, I drove into town again, alone this time. I walked into the small office of Lou and Grant Media. Karen was waiting with a neutral expression and a folder. New statement, she asked. Add this to the timeline, I said, handing over the audio transcript. Karen read a few lines, then looked up. He's toast. I nodded. Good. Want to be named this time. I hesitated. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to stay in the shadows. Yes, I said, but not as the wife. As the whistleblower. Karen smiled. Consider it done. That night, back at the villa, I didn't bother pretending anymore. Franklin sat on the couch, shell-shocked, a half-finished glass of scotch on the table. The TV buzzed with another panel discussion about him. He looked up at me like a man awaiting execution. I lost my job today, he said. The board voted. I'm out. I know. My parents saw the article. My mom cried. She cried for your downfall. I said, I cried for my marriage. He looked away. I sat across from him, pulled out one last envelope. What's this? Petition for divorce. I'm filing in the morning. All your accounts are frozen pending investigation. The house is under my name. You'll be served by noon." His jaw clenched. So that's it. That's freedom. He opened the envelope, flipped through the papers like maybe they weren't real. "I loved you," he said bitterly, "even when I was an idiot." "No," I said gently. "You loved what I gave you: stability, social status, the illusion of virtue. But love requires accountability. You never had that." He looked like he might cry, but I was done offering comfort. I stood and walked to the fireplace, dropped in the last printed photo from our honeymoon Florence, 2010. Our smiles were blinding back then. The flames swallowed it without hesitation. Franklin said nothing. I walked upstairs without a word. Later that night, I stood on the terrace alone, breeze lifting my hair, wine untouched on the railing. And then my phone buzzed. A new number. Just 2 words. "You're welcome." My blood ran cold. It wasn't Nathan. It wasn't Winter. I stared at the screen. Was someone else helping me? Was someone pulling strings behind my back? Cliffhanger, end, fan 6. The next morning, when I opened my inbox, there was a single email with no subject. Attached, a surveillance photo, Franklin, at a dinner, with someone I hadn't seen in years. And the caption read, "Did you really think he only betrayed you once?" The surveillance photo stared back at me grainy, late at night, but unmistakable. Franklin, dinner, not with a client, not with Winter, with Amanda, my ex-best friend, maid of honor at our wedding, godmother to a child we never had, the one who vanished the year Franklin made partner, claimed she moved to New York, claimed she was starting fresh. I zoomed in. Her hand touched his wrist across the candlelit table. A familiar intimacy, one he'd clearly practiced. The message beneath the photo still blinked on my screen. "Did you really think he only betrayed you once?" My stomach nodded. Not from heartbreak, no. That well had dried up, but from the sharp twist of clarity. This wasn't a one-time affair. This was a pattern, a legacy of manipulation dressed up as charm. I called Nathan. He picked up, voice still groggy. "Yeah. Do you know anyone named Grace at the Fairchild Group?" Silence for a beat. "That's Amanda's old assistant. She's the one who sent me the photo." Nathan swore under his breath. "So this goes deeper." I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me, Amanda disappeared the month Franklin got his biggest case. She said she moved, but I think she was removed. "You think he paid her off?" "I think he bought her silence the same way he tried to buy mine with gifts, guilt, and gaslighting." Nathan exhaled. "You want me to dig?" "No," I said quietly. "I want her to talk." I found Amanda at a tiny bakery in Berkeley the next afternoon. She looked older, not in a bad way, just more tired. Her eyes flickered with surprise when I sat down across from her without asking. "Matilda?" "Amanda." She didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "I knew this day would come." I placed the photo on the table between us. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "I'm here to understand." Her shoulders slumped. "He told me you were emotionally unstable, that you were drinking, sleeping around. He said he couldn't leave you because you were fragile." I stared at her. "I never touched a drop of alcohol," I said, "and you know that." "I know now," she whispered. "But he made it feel like truth back then. He was persuasive." "Manipulative," I corrected. She nodded. "He made me believe leaving you was helping you," she said, eyes wet. "He said we had to keep it quiet for your sake." "And what did he give you in return?" I asked. Amanda hesitated, then pulled out a check stub. $120,000, she said. "He said it was a severance package for our silence." "Our?" "So it wasn't just you and him." She looked away. There were others, some women, some staff, most of them younger, most of them scared. I inhaled slowly, a fire growing inside my chest. Not rage anymore, something colder, heavier. Purpose. That night, I didn't sleep. I crafted emails. I drafted statements. I contacted every woman Amanda listed, even if just to let them know they weren't alone. Some replied, some didn't. But the pattern was clear. Franklin Morrison wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator, protected by charm and the illusion of respectability. That illusion was about to shatter. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a quiet crowd at the Seattle Women's Leadership Forum. I was the final speaker of the day. They introduced me not as Dr. Morrison, but as Matilda Kyler. I had reclaimed my maiden name. I stepped to the podium in a charcoal blazer. Around my neck, the melted ring. Now a bold, solid chain. No sparkle, no pretense. Just weight. I spoke without notes. 3 months ago, I began. I believed in second chances, in grace, in the idea that people, when truly sorry, could change. A murmur of agreement passed through the audience. But I've since learned that forgiveness is not always the same as healing, and staying silent is not always the same as being kind. I paused. My ex-husband didn't just betray a marriage. He exploited power. He weaponized sympathy. He targeted the vulnerable. I told them about the affairs, about the fake diagnosis, about the gaslighting. I didn't name names, but I spoke truth. And when I finished, the applause was long, but the silence after was even louder. It was the silence of recognition. After the forum, a young woman approached me, maybe 23 glasses too big for her face, clutching a notebook to her chest. "You don't know me," she said, "but I interned at Franklin's firm last year. I thought I imagined the way he looked at me in meetings, the little gifts on my desk." I looked her in the eyes. "You didn't imagine it." She nodded. Tears welled. "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." That moment stayed with me longer than any article, any headline. That's when I knew my story wasn't revenge. It was rescue. 3 months later, the lawsuit against Franklin went public. Multiple women joined. So did 2 male associates. The firm dissolved under pressure. Franklin declared bankruptcy. Winter disappeared offline. Amanda opened a trauma-informed nonprofit in Santa Cruz. We talk, not as friends, as survivors. As for me, I moved to Seattle full-time. Bought a small house with a garden. I planted lavender. It grew like wildfire. Every morning, I walk barefoot across the dew-covered porch, press my necklace to my chest, and remember that I rebuilt from ash, that I turned a wedding ring into armor, that I was never weak for loving, only powerful for leaving. And now, I'm ready for peace. But if it ever tries to leave me, I know how to hunt it down. Story 2. My name is Anna Chen. I'm 34 years old, born in California, raised by immigrant parents who taught me that hard work was the price of survival in this country. That excellence was the bare minimum if I wanted to be seen. And for a long time, I believed that was enough. Until the day I lifted a cup of coffee to my lips and smelled something off, sweet, but beneath it, sharp, bitter, like burnt almonds. 15 years ago, in chemistry class, I learned that some people, just a few, have the genetic ability to detect cyanide by smell. I've always been one of the lucky ones. It's funny, the things that save your life sometimes don't feel like luck at all. That morning, I was sitting at my own dining table in our Chicago townhouse, with the man I married sitting across from me, Alexander, and his mother, Eleanor, right between us. All stiff posture and pursed lips. He had handed me the coffee himself. "With love," he'd said. That smile, smooth as glass, polished and practiced, had once made me feel special. But now I had seen it too many times. when he'd called my promotion a lucky break, when he'd helped Eleanor move in just for a few weeks after her fall, and she never moved out, when I'd come home from the hospital 3 months ago, after what the ER had written off as unknown gastrointestinal distress. His smile hadn't changed, but I had. I cradled the cup, fingers warming against the ceramic. It looked harmless, ordinary. But my instincts were screaming. Alexander sat back in his chair, too relaxed, too attentive, watching me with the kind of focus you'd give a poker hand, not a person you love. And Eleanor, in her sharp little voice, said, "It's getting cold. Alexander went to such trouble. You should drink before it loses the aroma." I looked at her. Her lipstick was too perfect for 9 a.m., and she'd positioned herself like a silent referee, keeping score. For months, I'd brushed off the weight loss, the dizziness, the nausea. I'd blamed it on the pressure of work, the new role as senior litigation partner finally after 10 grueling years. But something inside me, something quiet and stubborn, whispered this isn't just stress. I put the cup down and stood. "I need to use the bathroom," I said. Alexander's eyes flickered just for a second. Disappointment, panic. "Of course," he replied smoothly, but his voice strained around the edges. I walked down the hallway on autopilot. My skin felt too tight, my chest too shallow. I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, drawn. Shadows under my eyes, like bruises from a fight I hadn't realized I was in. The faucet ran cold. I splashed water on my face and reached up to adjust my watch, a cheap digital one I'd kept from law school. It had stopped ticking days ago, but I never bothered replacing it. Maybe because somewhere deep down, I already knew time had been slipping out of my hands. I opened the medicine cabinet. Behind the Tylenol and allergy pills was a small bottle of activated charcoal tablets. I stared at them. Then I made my choice. Back at the dining table, Alexander and Eleanor were whispering when I returned, heads close. They straightened like teenagers caught gossiping. "Everything all right?" he asked, smile still in place, but his jaw was tight. "Perfect," I said, taking my seat. I lifted the cup again. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I smiled. Then I turned toward Eleanor. "You look tired this morning," I said gently. "Would you like a cup? There's plenty." Her eyes brightened. She loved coffee, always had. But Alexander rarely made her any, probably because she asked too often, and he only enjoyed doing things when they held strings attached. "Oh, I couldn't," she said, but her voice was already softening. "I insist." I stood up, walking to the kitchen. My legs were shaking. I prayed they couldn't see it. In the cabinet, I found a mug identical to mine. I poured from the same pot, inhaled. This batch smelled fine. No almond, no metallic sweetness. Back in the dining room, I set the fresh cup in front of Eleanor, then leaned over to adjust my napkin. One practiced move clean. Smooth, I swapped the cups. "There you go," I smiled. "Enjoy." Eleanor's face lit up with a pleasure I hadn't seen in months. "Thank you, dear." Alexander tensed. His knuckles whitened around his spoon. I picked up my new cup, the safe one, the one that smelled like real coffee. Alexander's voice was flat. "Why don't you drink yours, Anna? You said you were tired." I looked him dead in the eye and took a sip. It was warm, rich, bitter in all the right ways. "Delicious," I said. Eleanor was sipping hers, nodding. "What's your secret, Alexander?" He didn't respond. She kept drinking. "I told you he makes the best coffee," I added. "He's always been so meticulous." Alexander's hands trembled. He looked from me to her, back to me. And I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. Because, finally, I knew I wasn't crazy. I leaned back, let the warmth fill me, and counted the minutes. 15. Eleanor's hand shook first. Then she placed the cup down, a soft clink against porcelain. I don't feel well, she said. Her voice was breathy, distant. I leaned in. What's wrong? I'm hot, dizzy. Her face was flushed, her breath quick. Alexander stood up so fast, his chair screeched. Mom, how much did you drink? Most of it, she whispered. Why? She never finished. Her body convulsed. The chair tipped. She collapsed to the hardwood floor with a thud that echoed through the house. Alexander screamed. No. He dropped to his knees beside her, grabbing her shoulders. You weren't supposed to drink that. His words hung in the air, heavy, final. I rose slowly, calmly, and reached for my phone. I'm calling 911. Anna, wait. He grabbed my wrist. I met his eyes. And for the first time in our marriage, he looked truly afraid of me. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled free. You've been poisoning me, slowly, month after month, just enough to make me weak, to make me look unstable, to make them doubt my competence, so you could get the partnership instead. His mouth opened, closed, his face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he whispered. I stepped back. It never is. As Eleanor twitched on the floor and the sirens echoed in the distance, I said the words that would end everything. I think it's time everyone knows what you've done. Alexander, you don't wake up one morning and realize your husband wants you dead. It happens slowly, quietly, one small moment at a time. Before the cyanide, before the trembling hands and the ambulance ride, and the confession that changed everything, there were signs. But they came wrapped in good intentions, polite gestures, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. 3 months before that morning, I had stood in a glass-walled conference room at Whitman, Rourke and Tilley, my law firm in downtown Chicago. The managing partner handed me the promotion letter with a warm handshake. Senior litigation partner, it read. The room clapped. People smiled. And Alexander smiled too. But his eyes didn't sparkle, not even a little. He took me out to dinner that night, said all the right things. You deserve this. I'm so proud of you. But later, in bed, he rolled away from me in the dark and said nothing at all. At first, I thought he was just tired. I told myself he'd come around. That's the thing about women like me. We're taught to rationalize discomfort. We smooth over red flags like wrinkles in a dress shirt. But they kept coming. First, Eleanor accidentally fell down the front steps of her apartment. Nothing broken except her pride. But Alexander insisted she move in temporarily, just until she heals. She's 62, Alex. She'll be fine with a nurse. No, he said. She needs family. She's alone. She moved into our guest room that weekend. By Monday, she'd reorganized the kitchen drawers. By Tuesday, she'd taken over the laundry. On Wednesday, she had rearranged our bookshelves, replacing half my legal text with her antique vases. Every morning, I woke up earlier just to breathe alone in the kitchen, only to find her already sitting there, drinking my coffee, watching. By the second week, she'd begun commenting on my appearance. You've lost weight. Are you eating? You look pale. Are you sure this promotion isn't too much for you? Alexander, who used to tease me about skipping meals, started chiming in. Maybe you are working too hard. Babe, you've been kind of distant. I wasn't distant. I was drowning. And yet, I found myself apologizing, trying harder, bringing home flowers for the kitchen, cooking dinner on nights when I should have been reviewing depositions, pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. One night, I came home late from a strategy meeting and walked into our bedroom to find Eleanor going through my dresser drawers. When I said her name, she didn't flinch. Oh, she said, as if it were nothing, I was looking for a charger. My phone died. You have a charger in your room, I reminded her. She smiled. Yes, but I thought I'd try yours. You always seem to have everything under control. It felt like a compliment, until it didn't. I told Alexander. He laughed. She's old school. She doesn't get boundaries. She opened my personal drawer. She probably thought it was hers. This is her first time living in a house this size. I bit my tongue so hard. I tasted blood. But things escalated. 2 weeks later, I opened the medicine cabinet and found one of my prescription bottles half empty, though I hadn't taken a single pill that month. When I confronted Alexander, he blamed the pharmacy. They always mess up the refill amounts. But it was the receipt that did it. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning out the back seat of his car, something I used to do without thinking, when I found a small, folded piece of paper wedged between the seat and the console. It was a receipt from a chemical supply store, $82.99, for potassium cyanide. My fingers went numb. When I brought it inside and laid it on the counter, Alexander's face didn't change. Oh, he said, that's for photography. Photography. Yeah, I was thinking about getting into film developing. You need chemicals for that. We didn't own a camera. You've never taken a picture that wasn't on your phone, I said flatly. He smiled. Maybe I want a new hobby. I took a photo of the receipt on my phone that night and uploaded it to the cloud. Just in case. That same week, Eleanor accidentally logged into my laptop while I was in the shower. She said she was checking her email. She had her own computer, her own phone, her own everything. I changed my passwords the next morning. She didn't say anything, but her tone shifted. Cold, calculating. She stopped calling me dear. Started calling me Anna again. Always flat, always clipped. Even when I passed her in the hallway, I could feel her watching me like a chessboard. Piece by piece, they were building a case. Not in court, but at home. A case that said Anna is stressed. Anna isn't sleeping. Anna is losing weight. Anna is becoming paranoid. And you know what? It worked. I started questioning myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if maybe this was all in my head. That's the most terrifying part of being gaslit. You start doubting your own sanity. Until the morning of the coffee. Until the smell. Until that sharp, almost sweet tang that pulled me back to a classroom 15 years ago, when Professor Hart had held up a vial in front of a lecture hall and said cyanide. Most people can't detect it, but if you can smell it, it's unmistakable. Bitter almonds. That was the moment the dots connected. The hospital stay. The nausea. The receipt. The laptop. The too sweet coffee handed to me with a smile. And Eleanor's eyes watching me, just like they had every morning. Waiting. I remember gripping the cup, feeling the heat seep into my palms. My fingers trembled. I told myself, if you drink this, it's over. But I didn't set it down. Not yet. I looked at Alexander. He smiled. And that's when I knew. He wasn't proud of me. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't even angry. He was afraid. Afraid that I had succeeded. Afraid that I had proven I was better. Afraid that the woman he once saw as a quiet, obedient wife had become something he couldn't control, a senior partner in a firm where he was still junior. And Eleanor. She was afraid too. Not of me, but of what I represented, a woman who had built her own name, earned her own title, created her own path outside of her husband's shadow. To people like them, that wasn't inspiring. It was dangerous. Because if I could do it, what excuse did they have? There's a silence that follows betrayal, not the kind that comes with heartbreak or disappointment, but the kind that settles in your bones when you realize you've been hunted inside your own home. That's the silence I lived with after I smelled the cyanide. From the outside, life went on. I showed up at the firm. I briefed clients. I argued motions. But under the surface, I was unraveling thread by thread. My appetite vanished. Sleep became shallow, full of shadows and the echo of Eleanor's footsteps outside my door. I knew they were watching me. I just didn't know how much they knew I was watching them back. One Thursday night, I came home early. I didn't announce it. I parked a block away, walked in through the back. The house was dark except for the soft blue glow of the kitchen light. Voices floated down the hallway. I paused outside the doorway. "She's slipping," Eleanor said. "The stress is eating her alive." Alexander let out a long breath. "It's working. Her assistant told me she missed another client call." "Good," Eleanor replied. "Keep her teetering just long enough. Let her implode on her own." "She needs to be handled," he muttered, "before she embarrasses the family." Handled? Like a liability, not a wife. Not a woman he had once claimed to love. I stepped back from the hallway, my hands shaking. The cold tile against my heels did nothing to ground me. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone, started a new entry, titled it, "They Think I Don't Know." Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. The pattern of my illnesses always peaking before major firm presentations. The timing of Eleanor's movements when she entered my home office, how long she lingered. The shifts in Alexander's behavior, the forced concern, the over-explaining, the way he kept refilling my coffee without asking. But I needed more than instincts. I needed proof. So I started locking my briefcase. I set up an old webcam on my bookshelf, pointed at my laptop. I switched out the lens on my reading glasses for a hidden mic and recorder, something I'd bought years ago when I briefly consulted for a private investigator. I didn't tell a soul, not even my best friend at the firm. Why? Because in this country, when you're a woman of color, when you're a first-generation, high-achieving professional, people don't believe your gut. They believe paperwork. So I built mine. Each time I felt sick, I logged the time, what I'd eaten, and who had served me. Each time I caught Eleanor hovering, I noted the time and saved camera screenshots. When I had enough, I printed a hard copy of everything and placed it in a sealed envelope labeled, "In case something happens to me." I gave it to my friend and paralegal, Jamie, and told her not to open it unless I went missing, or ended up hospitalized again. She stared at me, confused. "Anna, are you okay?" I smiled. Just covering my bases. But inside, I was boiling. Not with anger, with clarity. I finally understood. This wasn't about resentment, or even envy. This was about control. In Alexander's eyes, I had stepped too far outside the lines. I wasn't just his wife, I was now his superior. I had what he couldn't earn. And worse, I wasn't ashamed of it. Eleanor, with all her traditional values, saw me as a threat to the structure she built her life around: obedient wife, successful husband, quiet daughter-in-law who didn't ask too many questions. But I was asking questions now. And I was getting answers. One of them came on a Sunday afternoon when Alexander left his laptop open in the den. I wasn't snooping. I was surviving. The browser had several tabs open. One was an email thread between him and Eleanor. Subject line: handling Anna's condition. My stomach turned as I scrolled. Lines like, "The more unstable she seems, the easier it'll be to suggest medical leave. If we time it right with her next case, the partners might question her capacity. She doesn't even know what's happening to her." That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They were trying to erase me. Erase the version of me that had clawed her way up in a firm that didn't look like me, sound like me, or believe in me until I made it impossible to ignore. They wanted to return me to silence. But I wasn't going anywhere. That night, I took out the coffee mug from the kitchen, the same one Alexander always handed me. I ran it under the tap, washed it 3 times, dried it with a paper towel. Then I placed it on my office shelf, right beside my law degree. A symbol, not of weakness, but of vigilance. And when I looked at it, I didn't see fear. I saw warning. I wore my broken watch every day, the one that never told time, as a quiet protest, a reminder that the timeline they were crafting, the one where I spiraled, wasn't mine. I was still here, still ticking. But I needed a final piece. And that came 2 nights before the coffee swap. Alexander came to bed late. Smelled like gin and something sharp panic. Maybe. He kissed my forehead. I pretended to sleep. Then he whispered into the dark. She'll be better off away from all this. Me. It wasn't just poison. It was a plan. It started with a lie. I'm just feeling a little off this morning, I told Alexander as he handed me the mug. I could feel his eyes studying me, the way a predator studies the moment before a strike. He tilted his head. You sure you're okay? I forced a tired smile. I think I just need caffeine. You know how I get. He chuckled, then tapped the rim of my mug. Drink up. I brought it to my lips but didn't sip. Instead, I looked down into the dark liquid and saw everything they'd tried to make me doubt. Every moment they gaslit me. Every ache they brushed off. Every piece of my life they tried to rearrange until I couldn't recognize it anymore. And then I lowered the cup, slowly, and said, Actually, I need to use the bathroom. That was my pivot, my moment. Because what I did in that bathroom wasn't just about saving myself. It was about flipping the board. I locked the door, let the water run, and I stared into the mirror, not just at my face, but at the worn-out shell of someone who had given too many chances. I touched the watch on my wrist, the one that hadn't ticked in weeks. My father had given it to me when I passed the bar exam, to remind you that time is yours to use, not anyone else's to steal. I hadn't believed him until now. I pulled out my phone and double-checked the file I'd uploaded: voice memos, surveillance screenshots, the receipt for cyanide. It was all there, titled simply, Insurance. I splashed cold water on my face and took a deep breath. Then I opened the cabinet above the sink and took out a bottle of activated charcoal I had hidden weeks earlier, swallowed 2, and walked out like nothing had happened. Back in the dining room, Eleanor and Alexander were whispering, their heads close, a performance too polished to be spontaneous. They separated the moment they saw me. Everything all right? Alexander asked, smiling a little too wide. Perfect, I said. He gestured to my coffee. Don't let it get cold. But I had already made up my mind. I turned to Eleanor. You look tired this morning, I said casually. Would you like a cup? Alex made plenty. She blinked, surprised. Oh, I couldn't. But her eyes flicked to the pot behind me. Eleanor loved coffee, but Alexander rarely offered, which meant this was new and dangerous. I insist, I said. It's really good. She hesitated for just a beat too long, then nodded. Thank you, dear. I stood, walked into the kitchen, and poured her a fresh cup from the same pot Alexander had used, but I didn't bring it back immediately. Instead, I took a moment. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind was calm, focused. I brought the second mug back to the table and set it in front of her. Then, pretending to adjust my napkin, I made the switch. One smooth, practiced motion, the kind I had rehearsed a dozen times in my head, but never imagined doing in real life. There you go, I said. Enjoy. Eleanor's smile softened. For a second, she looked almost human. Thank you. I picked up my new cup, the one I knew was safe, and raised it to my lips. I murmured. You weren't kidding. It's strong. Alexander's face had gone still. You're really going to drink it? He asked. Why wouldn't I answered, meeting his eyes. He didn't respond, just sat there, stiff, lips pressed into a thin line. Eleanor took a generous sip and smiled. "This is wonderful," she said. "What did you put in it?" Alexander didn't answer. Because he couldn't. He was watching me too closely now, watching for signs, waiting for the crash. But the crash wasn't mine. We sat in silence for 10 long minutes. Eleanor chatted about some recipe she wanted to try, how the basil in the backyard was dying, how the neighbors had finally taken down their ugly Halloween lights. And then she paused. "I feel strange," she said, touching her chest. I leaned forward. "Strange how—" She swallowed hard, hot, dizzy, my hands. Her cup clattered onto the table. Her fingers trembled. Her breath grew shallow. Alexander shot to his feet. "Mom, how much did you drink?" "Most of it," she gasped. "Why?" She didn't finish the sentence. She convulsed once. Twice. Then collapsed sideways in her chair, knocking it over as she hit the floor. Alexander screamed, "No, you weren't supposed to drink that." He dropped to his knees, grabbed her face. "Stay with me. Stay with me." I didn't move. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I stood slowly, calmly, and pulled my phone from my pocket. "I'm calling 911, I said. Alexander's head jerked toward me. His face was pale, like all the blood had drained out. "Anna, please, you don't understand." I looked at him with something colder than rage, something sharper than grief. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You were poisoning me, slowly, methodically, small doses, just enough to make me weak, to make me sick, to make the firm doubt me, to make me doubt myself." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "Don't bother lying," I said. "I have the receipt, the emails, the audio." His hands trembled. "It was never supposed to kill you," he said, voice cracking. "Just put you in the hospital. Just make you look unstable for a while. Long enough for the partners to reconsider. Long enough for me to—" He stopped himself. And that's when I saw it. Not guilt. Not sorrow. Resentment. He was still trying to justify it. Still convinced that my success was the problem, not his failure. I dialed 911. "My mother-in-law has been poisoned with cyanide," I said clearly. "We need an ambulance. Now." The dispatcher asked for details. I gave them like a lawyer giving closing statements, precise, calm, cold. When I ended the call, Alexander was still on the floor, cradling Eleanor's head. "She helped you," I said softly. "Didn't she?" He didn't answer. She was the one going through my things, watching my schedule, making me question myself, telling everyone I wasn't well. He choked on a sob. "She said you were getting too big for your britches, that you needed to be reminded who you were." "Right," I said. "Handled?" Sirens wailed in the distance. Closer now. Alexander leaned his forehead against Eleanor's. "She wasn't supposed to drink it," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to be her." I looked down at them, mother and son. A team built on ego and fear. And I didn't feel pity. I felt release. They called it the coffee cup murder. Within hours, the story spread across Chicago's legal circles like gasoline finding a flame. A well-known attorney's mother-in-law dead from cyanide poisoning. The whispers came fast and louder than I'd expected. But I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. Eleanor died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The medics did everything they could, but cyanide moves fast, ripping through the body like wildfire. I watched them work. I watched Alexander crumble beside her, whispering apologies as if the paramedics could reverse death. When the police arrived, I didn't run. I handed over the bottle of cyanide I found hidden in his darkroom supplies, showed them the digital receipt from the chemical supplier, the folder of voice memos, screenshots, and emails I'd gathered piece by piece like a trial exhibit. They arrested Alexander right there in the kitchen, still wearing his house slippers. And me. I stood in my living room with Eleanor's coffee mug on the table in front of me. Still half full. Still deadly. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Because that cup, it wasn't just evidence. It was proof of everything they'd tried to silence in me. The next day, I walked into my firm's office like nothing had happened. Whispers followed me like shadows. She's the one whose husband. Wasn't she just promoted? Do you think she'll take time off? I ignored them. Head held high. In the courtroom, I'd always taught juries that doubt was a tool. But in life, doubt can kill you if you let it. So I didn't. Instead, I doubled down. 2 days after Alexander's arrest, I filed a civil suit against him for attempted murder, seeking damages that would legally freeze all shared assets, including our home. His defense tried to stall the process, claiming emotional distress and trauma from losing his mother. But I had recordings, I had emails, I had my medical records, showing a pattern of symptoms that tracked perfectly with my rise at the firm. And I had something better than sympathy. I had clarity. The DA charged him with first-degree murder and attempted murder. It went to trial within 4 months. The courtroom was packed. Reporters outside. Cameras weren't allowed inside. But the sketches showed him grayer, smaller than I remembered. He still wouldn't look at me. Maybe because deep down, he knew I'd become everything he feared. Not just successful, not just smart, but unstoppable. I took the stand on day 3. I want to be very clear, I said, voice steady as the microphone buzzed. My husband didn't just try to hurt me physically. He tried to dismantle my credibility, to make me believe that I was losing control of my mind. And he did it slowly, with help. I paused, eyes scanning the jury. His mother actively participated in creating a false narrative that I was unstable, that I was breaking under pressure. But I wasn't. I was paying attention. I described the months of stomach illness, the missed meetings, the planted doubts, the email threads about handling me, the hospital stay, the cup of coffee, the switch. When I told them Eleanor drank the poison by accident, a woman on the jury gasped out loud. And I let that silence hang. Because sometimes silence says everything. Alexander's lawyer tried to paint a different story. A man pushed too far, misunderstood, broken by pressure. A tragic accident. But the facts didn't bend. Not when the receipts showed cyanide. Not when Eleanor's fingerprints were on my laptop. Not when I had audio recordings of them planning my downfall. On the final day of testimony, the prosecutor played one clip, Alexander's voice saying, "She needs to be handled before she embarrasses the family." No one in the room spoke for a full 10 seconds. It took the jury 3 hours to deliberate. They found him guilty on both counts. Life without parole. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for 3 months. Justice had been served. But that wasn't the end. Because while the world saw a woman who survived an attempted murder, what they didn't see, what most of them still don't understand, is how close I came to believing I deserved it. That's what makes gaslighting so deadly. Not the poison, but the erosion. I kept the coffee cup. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I placed it on my office shelf, beside my framed law degree and a post-it note that read, "Trust your instincts." In my first month back at work, I took on a new case. A massive class action suit against a pharmaceutical giant that had hidden dangerous side effects from its consumers. The same case Alexander had once tried to derail behind my back. He'd accessed drafts of my arguments, forwarded confidential files to outside parties. Eleanor had searched my laptop while I was in the shower. I recovered the logs, the timestamps. They were sloppy, arrogant, and I was done letting arrogance win. The case took everything from me: focus, stamina, late nights with ramen, and depositions scattered across the dining room table. But I won. $200 million in damages. 3 corporate executives were indicted. The firm celebrated. But I didn't join them. I went home, turned off my phone, and sat at my kitchen counter. With that mug. The one I'd switched at the last moment. It was heavy in my hand. Plain, unassuming. Like so many things in life that turn out to be deadly. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee. Dark roast, no sugar. It tasted like truth. Some people think justice ends with a conviction. They imagine a clean gavel strike, a tearful statement, and then peace. But that's not how it works. Not when the people who tried to destroy you wore your wedding rings and called you family. For me, justice didn't end when Alexander was sentenced to life without parole. That was just the beginning of the reckoning. The day after the verdict, I sat across from the managing partners of Whitman, Rourke, and Tilley. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small in that boardroom. I didn't feel like the diversity checkbox. I felt like the woman who had survived a campaign of sabotage and still closed the biggest case of the year. They offered me the option to take a leave. "You've earned it," one of them said gently. "You've been through hell." But I declined. Because I knew if I walked away now, they'd never see me the same again. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted respect. And I wanted to build something they couldn't control. So I started the paperwork to open my own firm. Anna Chen, PLLC. No partners. No silent saboteurs. Just a team I'd choose. Cases I believed in. And a mission I could shape. That decision made waves. A few colleagues reached out, quietly, to congratulate me. Others unfollowed me on LinkedIn. You learn quickly who was cheering for your success and who was just tolerating it. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my career, I wasn't playing defense. I was building my own courtroom. My own terms. The story of the coffee cup murder refused to die. It hit headlines, then podcasts, then streaming true crime junkies. Some painted me as a victim. Others labeled me calculating. I remember one blog called me the lawyer who outplayed her own marriage. Funny. They never said that about the men who cheat, sabotage, and manipulate behind closed doors. But I didn't correct them. I didn't give interviews. I let the story twist itself however the public needed it to. Because I knew the truth. The real version lived in the file cabinets of my new office. In every audio file, every time-stamped screenshot, every marked-up deposition draft. But it also lived in smaller places, like the chipped mug on my desk, the one I switched that morning, and the broken watch I still wore every day. People noticed. "Why don't you get it fixed, my paralegal?" Jamie asked once. I smiled. It reminds me that I was never the one who lost track of time. That got a laugh. But to me, it wasn't a joke. It was a philosophy. Because while Alexander and Eleanor were orchestrating a breakdown, I was quietly building a timeline. And while they dismissed my instincts, I was teaching myself to trust them again. I still had to rebuild my health. The damage from months of low-dose poisoning doesn't just go away. There were days I couldn't finish a client call without trembling, mornings when I'd open a coffee bag and freeze, waiting for that scent. But it never came back, because he was gone, and I was still here. One afternoon, 3 months into running my firm, I got a call from a reporter. She was writing a long-form piece on gaslighting and professional relationships, how it shows up in marriages, in workplaces, in mentorships. She wanted to feature my story. "You're the clearest example I've ever seen of someone reclaiming their narrative," she said. "You didn't just survive. You rewrote the ending." I told her I'd think about it. Then I hung up and walked into my office. Sunlight was spilling across the hardwood floors. The walls were lined with law books, and photos of my team, mostly women, mostly people of color. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need the article, because I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Alexander had tried to poison me, but what he'd really tried to do was erase me. reduced me to a cautionary tale, a footnote. Instead, I had become something he couldn't predict. A symbol, not of pain, but of clarity, of survival, of justice, and maybe that's what scared him the most. The idea that I could outlive his version of me. But there was still one piece left, something I hadn't touched since the trial ended. My wedding ring. It had been sitting in a drawer, tucked away in a velvet box, like a relic from a life I no longer belonged to. I took it out one night, held it in my hand. It felt heavier than I remembered, not just from metal, but memory. I turned it over and saw the engraving. A.C. plus A.C. Alexander and Anna Chen. How poetic. He hadn't even considered that I'd keep the name, that I'd outgrow it, that it would become mine. Without him, I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept my loose keys and expired gift cards, and dropped the ring in. It made a hollow sound as it hit the bottom. Fitting? A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside one single line, handwritten on thick white paper. She wasn't supposed to drink it. I froze. The handwriting was his. I knew it. I turned it over. Nothing else. No signature. No stamp. Just that sentence. He wasn't supposed to have access to mail. Or to me. I checked the postmark. It had been dropped off at a local mailbox. Meaning, someone else had sent it. A friend. A favor. A warning. I didn't know. All I knew was this. He was still trying to tell the story. Still trying to make himself the victim. Still convinced that the real tragedy was losing control, not losing his mother. Not losing me. And that meant one thing: I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Fear had long since stopped visiting me. But because of something colder, more calculated. The letter? 5 words, handwritten in careful script, dropped anonymously into my mailbox. She wasn't supposed to drink it. I stared at it under the kitchen light, the edges trembling slightly between my fingers. The handwriting, it was Alexander's, slanted, oddly formal. But he was in prison. No access to paper, no stamps. No contact privileges. Someone had delivered it for him. Someone still on the outside. I flipped it again, blank. But it wasn't what the letter said that rattled me. It was the message beneath the message. That even behind bars, he still believed he could manipulate the story. Make it about his pain, his accident, his loss. Even now, when everything was over, he was still trying to recast himself as the real victim. It made me sick. But it also reminded me why I had to finish what I started, not just legally, but personally. Because justice isn't just about the verdict. It's about the story that gets remembered. So I did something I hadn't done since that morning at the dining table. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee. Same mug, same routine. I wrapped my hands around it, feeling the heat radiate into my skin. Then I sat at my desk, the one in my home office. Not the firm, not the courthouse. Just me, alone, in my space. And I opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "For every woman who was told she was too much." Then I started typing. Not a legal brief, not a deposition outline, but the full story. Every detail, every look, every moment I gasped for breath while they told me I was imagining things. The morning I found Eleanor in my room. The night Alexander whispered to himself, thinking I was asleep. The way the firm's HR manager had once pulled me aside and gently suggested, maybe tone it down a bit in meetings you come across intense. Intense. Ambitious. Sharp. All words that somehow turn toxic when worn by a woman like me. Especially one who didn't fit the expected mold. I wrote until sunrise. And when the first light bled through the curtains, I knew what I had to do. I sent the file to a friend at a national law review blog. I gave her permission to publish it, anonymously or with my name. She read it, then called me with tears in her voice. "This isn't just a story," she said. "It's a mirror." I nodded. Because that was the point. This was never just about me. It was about every high-achieving woman who's been told to smile more, speak less, or know her place. It was about the gaslighting we normalize in homes, in offices, in boardrooms. And it was about survival not just as an act of endurance, but as a statement of defiance. The article went viral. Comments flooded in. Women from across the country, different races, different ages, shared their own versions. I wasn't poisoned, but I was made to think I was crazy. My boss didn't use cyanide, but he used silence, exclusion, and doubt. And the most painful ones. My mother-in-law did the same thing to me. Suddenly, my story wasn't singular. It was systemic. Alexander had wanted to erase me, but he had accidentally ignited something bigger. And for once, that irony didn't taste bitter. It tasted like coffee. Strong, hot, unapologetic. 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a panel on legal ethics and institutional gaslighting. The other guests were seasoned attorneys, judges, and corporate counsel. And me, a woman once nearly poisoned to the edge of death, now standing at a podium, holding a laser pointer instead of a panic attack. I began with the same words I used at trial. My husband didn't just try to hurt me physically. He tried to dismantle my reality. There was silence in the room, and then pens scribbling, heads nodding. When it was over, people lined up to speak to me. One young lawyer, maybe 25, with tears in her eyes, said, "I thought I was just sensitive." I smiled gently. "No, you were perceptive. That's different." After that, I founded a nonprofit, the Instinct Initiative. Its mission was simple: to help women professionals document early signs of workplace sabotage and domestic coercion, to create a paper trail before the gaslighting could take root, to build safety through strategy. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. Every week, we received stories. Every month, we hosted workshops. And every time someone said, "This probably sounds crazy," but we interrupted them and said, "It doesn't, and you're not." I never heard from Alexander again. The prison system doesn't look kindly on those convicted of premeditated domestic homicide, especially when the victim survives and thrives. Maybe he still thinks of me, maybe not. But either way, it doesn't matter, because he is no longer the author of this story. I am. And in my version, the woman doesn't just escape the fire. She learns how to build something from the ashes. Anna Chen, attorney at law, is now engraved on the glass door of my office downtown. And underneath it, in smaller lettering, etched like a whisper that carries decades of defiance: "Trust your instincts." People ask me all the time, "How do you move on from something like that?" And I tell them, "You don't. You carry it. Like a scar that reminds you you've healed. Like a coffee mug that reminds you you're still alive. Like a broken watch that no longer needs to work. Because you've already taken back your time, and now it's your turn." If you've ever been told you were imagining things, if you've ever been made to doubt your gut, your strength, or your truth, leave a comment below. Tell your story. Or just say, "I'm still here." Because we see you. And you're not alone.